You're watching Unrendered on IKTV. We are all about you. And on this episode of Unrendered, my guest is the Honorable Camillo Gonsalves, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Okay, but I keep getting tripped up with Foreign Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs. I don't know why.
I don't think it matters.
Well, you're not foreign.
No.
We went out on this whole notion, the idea that people who are selected to these positions, by a matter of experience, must be closely aligned with the government of the day that's choosing these people.
Well, what you have to be, what the government has to be sure of when you go out there is that you will faithfully and forcefully advocate the position of the government. So we have to be confident that here is a person who understands the foreign policy initiatives, who understands the reason why these things are being done, and to advocate it forcefully. Because when I was ambassador at the United Nations, it's not every instruction that I received from the capital that I would have been fully in agreement with. I may have made recommendations to the capital that came back, not the way I wanted. But it was my job to advocate that position. I don't have an independent view. I'm not conducting, as a foreign representative, an independent foreign policy. I'm conducting the foreign policy of the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So you have to be certain that that person will not only understand it, but articulate it faithfully. And if you have a question in your mind that this person will be pulling aside the U.S. ambassador and saying, listen, man, I really don't agree with what the government is doing here, and that the people don't share this view and so on, then you are not suited to your job. Because the policy is set in capital, and your job is an appendage of that. You articulate it. So you may be the mouthpiece of the capital, but it's not your job to develop independent foreign policy in your postings.
Yeah, but that may be a little sugarcoating you're giving me there, because I accept that, right? But if you look to the US, UK, all these other sovereign states that appoint ambassadors and so forth overseas, there's always something in common. They are fiercely attached to the party of the day. They've either been unsuccessful candidates in an election, and it's a little sort of, okay, well, we pay you off. Or you may have been a past minister and we want you to give up that seat, as in James Mitchell, who got Carlisle Duggan. He speaks about it openly. Carlisle Duggan, the appointment in the UK to accommodate Mr. Eustace in East Kingstown. These people are unapologetically aligned to the government. Some of them may have been financial donors to the campaign over the years. So, yes, I take the sugarcoating that you're giving me by saying that they must qualify on that ground, but I think a big part of the qualification too is the unrelenting support.
Well, let's stop there for a minute. I was reading that in the United States that about 1/3 of the ambassadors selected by Obama are donors. They're not people with diplomatic experience.
Right.
They're political donors. They've raised a lot of money and so on.
Yes.
Right. To the
so it's a
Democrats.
payback.
It's a payback. But those people are placed essentially in vanity postings, non-essential postings to the interests of the United States.
Okay.
They place important people or people that they trust, serious diplomats or seriously qualified people in Russia and China and Syria or wherever, what have you. St. Vincent and the Grenadines doesn't have the luxury of non-essential postings.
I was going to say, and I hope we don't have vanity postings. Yeah.
And if it has been the case hitherto, under Mr. Mitchell, in talking about Carlisle Duggan, who I respect and who I think did a wonderful job in the United Kingdom, if that was a qualification, I think foreign policy under this government and certainly under this minister is far too serious for the primary consideration to be who is the firmer supporter or how is this going to benefit any local merry-go-round politically in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Political supporters have been selected and will continue to be selected.
Yes.
Because they can be by the government trusted to advocate in a certain way. And they are also willing to make sacrifices for the government that others may not be willing to do. It is easier to pitch to a political supporter, uproot your family, uproot your children, take a lower salary.
Right.
You're doing this for the government and for the party and so on and so forth. That's an easier sell
Right.
to a political supporter than it is to somebody who is non-partisan or supports the other side. So it will continue to happen. It will happen under this administration. It will happen under future administrations. But that under this minister and under this government
Yes.
has never been the primary consideration in selection.
I respect your position, but again, with due respect, let me throw an awkward question into the mix, and I'm going to bring it as close home to you being here and maybe being groomed maybe for the East St. George constituency. Is it that Mr. Fitzhuggins, who is now the Consul General in Canada?
Consul General in Canada.
Right. Is it that this may have been a machination as well? He's been moved out of the way to create that space for Camillo so that Fitz does not contend to be the candidate for East St. George as it was rumored that he was? Is that something that we can... Are you going to dispel that, or something that has meat on the bone?
Every time you chat to me,
yes,
you raise this East St. George constituency issue. In fact, we spoke about it less than a week ago. I mean, nothing has changed between last week and this week, by the way. I don't know what went into the decision for Fitzhuggins to go to Canada. Mm-hmm. I, at the time, was ambassador in the United Nations when that decision was made. I do not think Fitzhuggins is a credible, strong, qualified individual. If Fitzhuggins didn't want to be Consul General in Canada, he wouldn't be there. If Fitzhuggins wanted to represent East St. George,
he would throw his hat in the ring.
Which he may still want to do. Mm-hmm. He can throw his hat in the ring at any point. There is no silencing, sidelining, no machinations at all. Mm-hmm. People need to stop seeing conspiracies behind every shrub and hedge in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. A man got a job, he was offered a job because he was well suited to the job, and he's doing a fantastic job at that job. If the time comes when he decides he wants to have a local political future rather than an overseas diplomatic future, Fitzhuggins will make that determination.
We are in the dying moments of this last segment of the program, and I'm willing and hopefully you'd accept the invitation to come back here and let's talk some foreign policy, and
I would like that.
Let's look at some macro issues and maybe leave the local politics.
I would like that.
A little at rest.
I would like that. And if you promise not to ask me about East St. George in the next one,
it may be confirmed by then. So I won't have to ask. But let's touch on one thing here. How, in your assessment, has the foreign policy direction of the ULP administration in the 13 years of governance promoted the cause of St. Vincent, has actually benefited us directly due to your foreign policy advocacy?
St. Vincent and the Grenadines, probably more than any other OECS and maybe any other CARICOM country, has benefited immensely from the renewed focus on foreign policy under the current administration. Foreign policy in the past was simply a matter in the Cold War times of picking a side and aligning with it. You were either pro-US and benefits would flow, or you were Soviet and benefits would flow. And you can put up Eugenia Charles versus Morris Bishop or whoever you like and say that. So it was not to say that it wasn't fraught with dangers, but it was not the complex world that we face today. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has realized that as a small state, as a resource-limited state, as a vulnerable state, as a state with a small population, as a state that has climate change and economic vulnerabilities, all the rest of it, it is very important to interface with the outside world in a serious way. Our voice, our authority, our respect, these intangibles have been raised immeasurably under this administration. And because of that, countries now come to us soliciting our support and our influence within the region and extra-regionally to advance various causes and ideas, and we insert ourselves in various conflicts if we have a principled position to advocate.
Right.
Now, what do we have tangibly? And I think it's a little crass sometimes to reduce foreign affairs to what can you show for it.
Yes,
and I think
pick a list and say,
exactly.
Argyle International Airport,
exactly.
this hospital,
it's a difficult thing to do.
Center.
It's a difficult thing to do. But we can say for sure that prior to this administration, it would not have been possible to use the levers of foreign affairs and our sovereignty to have the Argyle International Airport.
So that seems to be a big one.
That's a big one. The healthcare sector has benefited immensely. The social sector has benefited immensely. If you want to talk about learning resource centers and schools and hospitals, the modern complex in Georgetown, I mean, you can make this list. I think it's a little crass to do, but you can make this list. And then you want to look, for example, at how St. Vincent and the Grenadines has survived the global economic and financial crisis relative to other countries. St. Kitts and Nevis has had to go to the IMF. Antigua and Barbuda has had to go to the IMF. Jamaica has had to go to the IMF. Dominica has had to go to the IMF.
Barbados is head in there.
We can go down the list. And then you say, well, who hasn't gone? Well, you say, well, Trinidad and Tobago, because they have, Grenada has gone to the IMF, because they have natural mineral wealth.
Right.
St. Vincent and the Grenadines. What is special about St. Vincent and the Grenadines? Why our economy has survived, been battered, surely, has struggled, surely. One of the reasons, and there are many reasons, one of it is prudent economic management and all of it.
But there's also the underground economy, which is for another program.
But every country has an underground economy to one extent or the other, and they haven't been able to keep governments afloat. They may have been able to keep individuals afloat, but not governments. Now, St. Vincent and the Grenadines has been able, because of its strong position in ALBA, in Petrocarib, with Cuba, with Taiwan, has been able to get resources that other countries had to turn to the IMF to get. And we have been able, in the midst of a financial crisis, to begin and now almost complete the largest infrastructural project in the history of this nation. And the reason we've been able to do that is because we have been able to effectively marshal our foreign policy resources to the benefit of our people.
So are you sure in Vincentians, therefore, as you know, look at going to the IMF as the option that some countries have had to take, a pill that they've had to swallow. You're saying that we've not had to swallow that frog thus far, but unlike the conditions that are attached to an IMF loan, etc., which is what people are afraid of, a lot of that comes with austerity, etc., massive cuts in this and so on. Going to or using the levers of your foreign policy and going in the direction of ALBA and so on, you are saying that we're not attached to any such conditions. These are not conditional over and above things that have virtually sold out your sovereignty.
No. Prime Minister Mitchell famously commented once that we had effectively sold our sovereignty or surrendered our sovereignty, sorry, I don't want to misquote
well,
him,
surrender also,
to the United States. We have not done that. And the conditions attached to an ALBA loan are repayment conditions. What percent, what rate of time, and so on and so forth.
So it's not that access civil service by 10%.
No. And if you look at the money that we have
stop
gotten,
public spending by this,
if you look at the money that we have gotten from ALBA, and I don't want in any way to suggest that we view ALBA or Petrocarib as simply a fund into which we dip. There are a number of principled reasons that we align ourselves with these countries for integrationist purposes, for anti-hegemony purposes, and the like. But if you look at the programs that we have spent Petrocarib and ALBA money on, they have been social programs. The first thing to go with the IMF are social programs. Because these are things that don't generate a return. So whereas other governments have been cutting the civil service or cutting services, whether it's medical services, educational services, infrastructure and so on, we have been spending money in those areas.
So just quickly, let's look at the corollary to what you've been saying about your foreign policy and going to these non-traditional governments, you know, these traditional friendly governments that people talk about, the US, UK, Canada, and so on, right? So we've gone to the south, and we're looking at the Alba Pact, etc. And also in the
east as well, yes.
In the east, you've had relations with, Iran, Turkey, and
Malaysia,
and so
India,
on.
Taiwan.
In that whole pact, there are some states that would be referred to as rogue nations, as described by the U.S. So I'm saying the corollary to that, is it that we risk being branded as such with our strident relationships with countries such as Iran and Venezuela that are termed rogue nations by U.S. qualifications?
I would take issue with anybody that calls Venezuela a rogue nation. Venezuela has undergone more democratic elections in the last decade than the United States. And those elections have generally been held to be free and fair. If the foreign policy or the global outlook of Venezuela differs from that of the United States, that doesn't make it a rogue nation any more than it makes the United States a rogue nation to Venezuela. We are friends to both.
Right.
I don't think my list of rogue states doesn't include the states that you just mentioned. I mean, if I were to name a rogue state, I would say North Korea.
Right.
We could have a debate about Zimbabwe.
Right.
But these are not the states with which St. Vincent and the Grenadines has sought to have relations and developmental partnerships. And we are not beholden or in bed with any of them. Iran, we have not converted any Iranian to like Skinny Fabulous any more than any Iranian has converted us to Sunni or Shia Islam.
Right.
So we have state-to-state relations.
So they are what they are. They are diplomatic relations.
We align with them on issues that we agree, and we differ from them on issues that we don't. And if you look at any of our records, you will see where we agree and where we disagree. And mature foreign relations aren't you either with me or against me. Those days have long since passed, and they died with the Cold War.
Honorable Camillo Gonsalves, it's been a pleasure having you on this episode of Unrendered.
And we do it again soon.
My pleasure.
All right.
This has been another edition of Unrendered. My guest was the Honorable Camillo Gonsalves, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Do look at IKTV for the next time that Unrendered airs. Thanks for viewing.